many other things. It's I think that the story of Todd and Lisa Beamer is one you can't forget on 9/11. I mean, here is a husband and wife and two sons, David and Drew, and later a daughter born that Todd Beamer never met. An extraordinary story and one of those heroes on United Airlines Flight 93. David, nice to have you on the Scott Hennon Show and the Common Sense Club. We're glad to have you today.
Well, good morning. Good to be here.
Let me ask you first how your daughter-in-law Lisa's doing and the grandkids.
Hey, thanks for asking, Lisa and the kids. They're doing just fine. They're doing what young kids ought to be doing, right? They're growing. They're going to school. They're playing lots of sports, and everybody's okay.
One of the extraordinary things, my wife always talks about this, was the faith that Lisa had after losing that. Because who wouldn't in that similar position be as distraught as you could be? All of a sudden. A widow at a young age, two sons, and another on the way, and yet she demonstrated so eloquently her faith about God having a different plan for Todd. It was phenomenal, and I imagine that's no small feat and quite a challenge to maintain that level of faith through something so tragic, huh?
Well, the fact of the matter is that the Beamer household, including Peggy and I, Todd's parents, say we're all we're Christians, and in that we have assurances and we have hope. And we have contentment about the ultimate future. And, of course, there was a real blessing for us on that horrific morning, and that's the fact that, Todd Beamer was a Christian on September the 10th. Turns out that was pretty important.
No question about it. Bring us back to 10 years ago on that morning of 9/11. Did you know your son was on a flight for work?
I had no idea. Todd and Lisa, Todd had earned a sales incentive award trip. You know what those are? Hey, great trips if you do a really good job. And this particular one happened to be an award trip, all expenses paid, to Italy. Todd and Lisa were in Italy on September the 10th. I didn't know exactly the calendar and the schedule. I didn't think they were coming back to the USA until later that week, so I had no idea that Todd was even back in the country, much less on an airplane that morning.
How did you find out ultimately? I mean, tell us a little bit about when you learned of the attacks at 9/11 and put the pieces together that your son was on one of those planes.
Well, I was still working in those days. I've since retired, but I was working in those. I was in California. Peggy was on the East Coast. I didn't find out until that afternoon when Peggy, my wife, called me. She'd spoken with Lisa, and we heard the news. I certainly knew of the attack on our homeland, but I had no idea that Todd was on that plane. And of course, in just a matter of hours after the attack, it became, I think, obvious to America that the passengers and crew on Flight 93 they did something because that part of the enemy's plan, which I believe was to take Flight 93 into the dome of our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., that part of their plan was turned out to be an absolute failure because Todd and 39 other free peoples on that plane had the opportunity and took it to fight back. So it turned into a victorious counterattack by 40 free people on Flight 93.
And how did you learn? How did you learn, David, about all of the heroism of Todd and his fellow passengers on Flight 93?
Well, we knew early on that they all must have done something, and we knew in our heart of hearts that Todd would have been a part of it. And of course, there's a special blessing, I think, for the country in terms of cellular telephone technology and airphone technology. So we had a GTE telephone operator who had that several moment conversation with Todd, and I refer to Lisa Jefferson, that wonderful telephone supervisor. She was an independent ear witness to what was transpiring, and of course she's the one that heard the last words from our son. Are you guys ready? Let's roll. And that was a call to action. That they all did the right thing in a horrific circumstance, and it was was good. It was good for the country to understand that some Americans fought back and had a victorious counterattack on that horrific day.
You, like me, were upset that... I'm sorry, what, David?
Go ahead.
I was going to say, you, like me, were upset that President Obama seemed to focus a little too much of the attention of the killing of Osama bin Laden on his own role, and rather than the Navy SEALs, and rather about remembering what it was all about. As you look at all the different things that have happened since that day, whether it be Afghanistan or Iraq or the ultimate killing of bin Laden, has enough been done to right the wrongs? Do you believe?
Well, on the May Day 2011, that's the day when Navy SEALs introduced Osama bin Laden to his maker, was a good day. And it reflects, effort by our intelligence community and lots of brave men and women in our military that over the years made that happen. Yes, there were a number of events that week that did not sit well with me. The fact that President Obama took way too much personal credit for that eventuality, an excessive use of the personal pronoun I, me, my, as is his custom. And that circumstance, I thought, was really very untoward. Later on that week, on the 5th of May, our president went to Ground Zero, and there was nothing wrong with that. He went there to remember and to reach out to family members and took a memorial wreath and an appropriate solemn ceremony there at Ground Zero. He sent Vice President Biden with a memorial wreath of flowers and appropriate recognition and remembrance at the Pentagon. Do you know who from the White House brought the flowers to Shanksville?
Who?
Did you see that in the media?
I didn't.
You didn't because nobody came. There were no flowers. There was no remembrance. There was no one from the White House or this administration bothered to show up in Shanksville. That, to me, was an egregious affront and a lack of respect and honor for 43 people who were casualties of war, had this victorious counterattack, and our president and this administration completely ignored it on the 5th of May.
Yeah, it is tragic, along with so many other things. Thankfully, Flight 93 Memorial is being dedicated this weekend, but that one has taken too long, no question about it. David, our best to you and to Lisa, the whole Beamer family, your wife Peggy, and appreciate you sharing a little bit of your memories, and continue to pray for you and others on this weekend.
Great to talk to you. That memorial is not done. I encourage people to go and look at it.
Please do. Absolutely.